In the spring of 2013, what began as a routine emergency call for two police officers would turn out to be anything but ordinary. The experience that followed would chill them to their core and leave them questioning their own reality for years to come, as they tried to make sense of the riddle later known as the Crosswade Interlopers. Music, the pitch of the engine rose as their vehicle gathered speed, tearing down narrow country lanes that would have been pitch black if not for the headlights cutting through the night. In the passenger seat, James Haviland briefly considered flicking on the blue lights and sirens, but decided against it. The roads were deserted, not another car in sight. It was 2:21 a.m. on the 31st of March, 2013. James and his on-duty partner, Chris Braddock, who was behind the wheel, had just been dispatched by the CCR, the contacts and control room, to investigate a possible break-in at a remote facility hidden away in the countryside. They were patrolling the outskirts of Whitehaven, a town in the Copeland district of Cumbria, England. Their destination lay only 3 miles ahead. Within minutes they would be on site, though neither man could have known that what awaited them would challenge their very understanding of the world. The facility was owned by Crosswade Enterprises, and it was already something of a local curiosity. Its sleek, modern architecture looked alien against a rolling English countryside, and its cutting-edge technology seemed wildly out of place. It was a smart building, equipped with advanced security systems, automated lighting and climate controls, and state-of-the-art management software. The last thing you'd expect to find hidden in such a quiet, rural location. As they arrived, the structure loomed in silence, cloaked in eerie darkness. Not a single interior light burned. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. Nothing to suggest a break-in. Yet the report had been clear. The building's alarm had been triggered intermittently, and the passive infrared sensors, designed to detect heat signatures, had registered movement inside. This intel had come from the facility's manager, who was off-site but monitoring everything remotely. Even so, the stillness unsettled them. Chris and James parked across the road and sat for a moment, watching the building in silence, waiting for the faintest hint of activity. James thought he caught a quick flash from one of the ground floor windows, a reflection maybe, or a sensor, or perhaps just his imagination. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Only the sound of the wind pressing against the car, leaves rustling in the hedgerows. Peaceful, yet oddly disquieting. And then something changed. Both men's eyes were drawn to the lobby as a light flickered on, spilling across the interior. The automatic front door slid open, then slammed shut again before the alarm began to howl into the night, a piercing wail that cut straight through them. Startled but steadying themselves, both officers believed at first that they had to measure the situation. At first, Chris and James assumed the access system was malfunctioning. Perhaps the sliding doors were breaking the live circuit and tripping the alarm. But before they could radio back to the CCR, a figure suddenly emerged from the entrance. The man paused, glanced directly toward the patrol car, then jogged off into the darkness, disappearing around the right-hand side of the building. Seconds later, another figure appeared, taller this time, heading left instead. Ordinarily, James and Chris would have jumped out and given chase, but something made them hesitate. Even at a distance, silhouetted against the glow from the lobby, they could see the distinct outlines of peaked caps and bulky stab vests. These weren't intruders. These were police officers. Chris instinctively scanned the scene for another patrol car, while James radioed through the dispatch, asking if another unit had been deployed. The reply was immediate, negative. They were the only officers on scene. That left only one other possibility: security guards. But the facility was supposed to be unmanned, remote, isolated. Something was deeply wrong here. Moments later, the two figures returned, stepping back into view at the front of the building. They stood side by side, looking oddly uncertain. The taller of the two nudged a pebble with his boot, an insignificant detail at the time, but one that would later prove crucial. Both men moved with a strange familiarity. The tilt of the shoulders, the gait, the way they carried themselves, it all tugged at something half-recognized. James and Chris exchanged a glance. They knew these men, or at least it felt as though they did. Then, in unison, the figures turned and began running directly toward their police car. Startled but steady, Chris and James stepped out, caps on, ready to confront them. But when they looked up, the forecourt was empty. The lights inside the building had gone dark again. The alarm had fallen silent. The two figures had vanished into thin air. They stood in the open car park, staring at one another in stunned silence. The night itself seemed to pause. The wind gone, the rustling leaves stilled, the air heavy and muffled as though the world itself were holding its breath. Finally, James broke the silence. He suggested they search the building. Reluctantly, Chris agreed. The front doors were locked tight, and only with the manager's remote access could they get inside. The lobby felt oppressive, the silence pressing in as they split up. Chris climbed the stairs to the first floor, while James moved through the darkened offices below. Nothing seemed out of place, yet the sense of unease grew heavier with each step. As James returned toward the lobby, the lights flickered to life. The doors hissed open and shut. The alarm shrieked into the night once more. He quickened his pace, spotting Chris descending the stairs at the same moment. Convinced an intruder had slipped past them, they rushed outside, scanning the car park. Nothing. James darted left, circling toward the rear. But the only thing waiting there was a refuse area boxed in by high brick walls, impossible to scale. No escape route, no hiding place. When he returned, Chris was already coming back from the opposite side. Both men met at the entrance, baffled and unsettled. Reluctantly, they considered reporting it as a malfunction. But both knew what they had seen. Two other figures, two men. Explaining who those men were, or where they had gone, was another matter entirely. And then it happened. As they stood discussing their options, Chris, towering at 6'6", idly kicked at a small pebble on the ground. In that instant, realization crashed over them. They turned toward their patrol car. Two faces were staring back at them through the windscreen. Their own faces. The glow of the dashboard lights reflected off skin that was unmistakably theirs. Heart pounding, they sprinted toward the vehicle. The doors were already open, but the seats were empty. Whoever or whatever had been inside was gone. For James, the events of that night have never faded. He has spent years trying to rationalize it. Before then, he had never once described himself as a believer in the paranormal. Even now, he clings to skepticism. But no amount of research, no expert opinion, has brought him closer to an explanation. Did they encounter their own doppelgangers? Experience a glitch in reality? A brief fracture in time itself? Or did their minds simply betray them in the early hours of that March morning? Neither man knows. What they do know is this. The incident never made it into official reports. Names and details have been changed. Crosswade Enterprises never existed. But somewhere in the wilds of Cumbria, a building still stands alone, stark against its countryside surroundings. And whenever James and Chris recall that night, a cold shiver still runs down their spines. Music